Everybody, welcome back. We have breaking news. Brian Laundrie's death, cause of death, is ruled a suicide. He died of a gunshot wound to the head, apparently. This final autopsy. Let's hear what the news has to say about it. But first, the guy that's been covering the case all along, he literally lived right outside of the Laundrie house, is Brian Enton. He, I think, broke the news first. Brian Laundrie died of a gunshot wound to the head and manner of death, suicide, according to the Laundrie family attorney, Stephen Bertolino. No one knows where the gun came from. The full statement from Bertolino was, Chris and Roberta Laundrie have been informed the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. The manner of death was a suicide. Chris and Roberta are still mourning the loss of their son and are hopeful that these findings closure to the family. Interesting. Alrighty then.
Elevator that will take them to the top of the...
That was very cowardly. That we know what he did.
Right on that point. Let's do 3 for 1 here. Lauren Dolce, hashtag AJB.
Remains were found, and we don't have the answers. I don't have the specifics on what
Chris and Roberta in Northport, they have been informed of the manner of death being a suicide and that it was via a gunshot to the head. But tons of questions. I know that sounds like a broken record, but still tons of questions. And the big one that comes out of this, Josh, we already see it online, already see it in our Facebook comment section, Twitter, hello to YouTube as well. You can use hashtag AJB, hashtag AJosh, but the big question we're already seeing is, if he died by a gunshot wound to the head, where's the gun?
Right. Everybody's asking that right now.
Where's the gun? Now, happening at the Carlton Reserve, if it was a, let's say if it was a pistol, if it was a smaller firearm and it was a gunshot wound to the head, of course, you would imagine that firearm doesn't travel very far.
Right. You and I were talking about that, and if in the area where the remains were found, obviously remains can get taken from animals. They can carry off by the water. We had talked about how deep the water could have been when this situation unfolded earlier. A gun is going to sit kind of where it sits, and I think especially how heavy it is. It could be down in the mud. It could be under all that water and now under the surface of the leaves and the ground there. So I don't know if they had metal detectors out there at the time during that search with the FBI and with Northport, but you got to believe they're going to be looking for a gun at this point. Because we haven't been told that they had found one. I think we would have been given the heads up that something. We were told that the dry bag and the notebook were found.
It would be very bizarre for the FBI and Special Agent in Charge McPherson announcing at that press conference. Everyone remembers that press conference that day at the Carlton Reserve when they came out and they said that they had found, you know, the book bag and that they had found a notebook. It would be very strange for them to say that they had found those two items and didn't find a firearm there at the Carlton Reserve.
But
Yeah, I wonder where the gun is. No, we just would have known he was armed.
maybe, I don't know. I think that's where an update would then be very useful from the FBI to say, this is the cause of death, this is the manner of death, this is the evidence we have, and this is what we know about the case so far. That would just put a lot of rest to a lot of the questions that people have out there on Twitter and on social media right now, because just a lot of speculation on where this could go from here.
So we have been told, and I was working the phones all morning trying to get more information as to where exactly we were going to get the update from as far as Brian Laundrie's manner of death. This, of course, coming from Stephen Bertolino. And let's kind of preface this by saying that this is very extraordinarily common, and I talked about this a little bit on Twitter, Josh, in that the family is going to get advanced notification. Mm-hmm. It's FBI. It's just the manner in which it's their MO as far as how they operate, that they're going to call the family and let them know in advance. They don't want them to find out from the media or from the public at large.
Sure.
So you make that phone call. Mm-hmm. So then it's Stephen Bertolino's option at that point, him, of course, representing his clients, and I'm sure that they had a conversation. He's going to release it to the media if he so chooses to. That's his prerogative, and he chose to do so. We don't know exactly when that call was, but here, I'll share a little bit of my text exchange with Bertolino. At 11:36 Eastern Time, actually 11:38, we can say 11:38 Eastern Time, he said his clients hadn't received that courtesy call from law enforcement. So that might have come between when the initial text came in, so between really in that 2-hour window. So really this afternoon was when, as we understand it, the Laundries found out that their son, their 23-year-old son, Brian Laundrie, died by suicide of a gunshot wound to the head. And now it's just waiting on the FBI. Now, what is the FBI document? I've been hearing that they are preparing a release of some kind. What is that document going to tell us that the Stephen Bertolino text doesn't? Are they going to announce any more specific details about whether about the examination process? A forensic anthropologist was given the remains for a period of time, so on and so forth. Are they going to release more about the methodology behind how the conclusion was reached that it was suicide? Because I know that there's a lot of people here, and hello YouTube and Facebook, hello everybody. We'll get to your comments here momentarily. A lot of people that just want more details and want more specifics. But are we going to find out more in the FBI's document that we don't have right now from Stephen Bertolino's text message? Is a big question as well.
Can you look at this real quick?
I can.
A lot of people are asking about that. That's your Facebook? Okay.
Yep, let's fix it.
It was a typo, so we just want to make sure that's clarified. So as we know at this hour from the attorney, now this is all we're getting from the attorney. The attorney is the one who is sending out the information that the parents have been informed that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and the manner of death was suicide. So yeah, as JB brought up, the question is, where's the gun? That's a big question because obviously it could possibly be in the reserve and very close where those remains were found. But I know a lot of people went out to the reserve after the FBI had opened it. The public was there. I know a lot of people had been searching on their own. They'd been doing their own, digging around there. They've been sending pictures, posting stuff to social media. So if that's the case, I think a water bottle was found outside of the investigation, and more remains were found. We weren't certain if those were human or not. I don't believe they were, but that was some of the stuff that the public found on their own after the investigation was wrapped up at the Carlton Reserve. So we have been waiting for this update for a while. I know we've been checking in with the attorney, Stephen Bertolino, for weeks, just checking in randomly to see if anything was going to pop up. And to be honest, I didn't think any update was going to be made before the holidays. It seems to be when you have updates of this nature leading up to the holidays, especially with government agencies, that information usually doesn't hit during a holiday necessarily. But in this case, it came out when, and I think, JB, you're right. I think the family was notified. I'm sure they were notified. They had that discussion on if they wanted to put that out there. And I'm hoping we hear now from the FBI to give an official news conference or statement, or at least maybe the report as to what they found. So that's what we're waiting on now. And you could be right. The attorney said 1 o'clock. That could be perceived as maybe 1 o'clock Mountain Time. We don't know that for sure, but we're going to try to find out.
Yeah, that's interesting to note that it could be coming in the next hour and a half. Let me put out there, and Josh, thank you for the heads up. So I initially put out a social media post that then got pushed out to several different places, and I was typing at the time that that the manner of death has been ruled a suicide in relation to, of course, the ongoing investigation into Gabby Petito's homicide. Words got mixed up. Apologies to all of my social media followers on my WFLAJB Facebook and Twitter pages. That is completely 100% on me, so sorry for the erroneous tweet and the erroneous Facebook post. Brian Laundrie's death has been ruled a suicide
It was never ruled a homicide. It was just a mix-up of words and just typing way too fast. So apologies for that. Okay, so back here with you live, everybody, on WFLA Now. What we're going to do is we're going to feature some of your #HeyJB, #HeyJosh comments. And Josh, this is something that I know a lot of people are chiming in online about. We've been talking about this, the unanswered questions. That was our last WFLA Now stream about Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito, and this was one of the ones on that list. What exactly happened to Brian Laundrie? But let's talk about timeline for a second. I'm going to queue up some of the comments, but we were talking the last time you and I were on stream. We were talking about how the decomposition of the remains and them being skeletal. Puts the timeline only in. It's not as if that he passed away and that the suicide was done in October. This is likely something that was done, and we have of
soon
course
after he returned.
Soon after making his way into the Carlton Reserve, and that's another answer that we're sort of now getting just some more light shed on here with this information from Bertolino.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we went through those motions of trying to figure out, remains and how long it takes for decomp and things of that nature. And, we covered that in depth over the past month and a half. And basically, I think it comes down to the fact that he came back from his trip, met with his family out at the campground, went home. Words were exchanged with the family. He went out to the reserve. And I would imagine, in my opinion, that happened soon thereafter. So that would give time for the remains to settle. If the water came up, obviously we looked at the water levels, so that would have played a factor. The humid climate here in Florida.
Please leave a like and sub on the video.
And how those remains were skeletonized, as we were told. And only partial remains. A lot of you are asking right now what remains were found, and we don't have the answers. I don't have the specifics on what remains were found, but obviously there was enough evidence. Couldn't be determined initially from the medical examiner. That's why I went to the anthropologist to really take a closer look at DNA and the skeleton to determine a cause of death and a manner of death. So that's what we know at this point. So still a lot of answers. It's a frustrating one because we've all been waiting for some type of closure on the case, for instance, but obviously there's not going to be closure for Gabby's family at this point. We want to try to get more answers, constantly get as much information as we know. Now, where is the gun? Obviously, if it's a gunshot wound to the head, where does that gun exist? Is there one? Is it still in the reserve? Those are all questions now we're going to want to find out. So my hope is the FBI in Denver will give a press conference. And according to the attorney, he had mentioned he was going to get his information at 1 o'clock. So we don't know if that was 1 o'clock Eastern, which is past us now, or if it's 1 o'clock Mountain, which would put us at 3 o'clock Eastern. So we'll keep our eyes open for that. And if you guys have anything else, we'll start taking some questions here too.
Yeah, we're gonna start to feature some out of the Facebook Live comment section. But what's interesting. Gabby Petito's death ruled a homicide. Brian Laundrie's death ruled a suicide. We have that in different states and completely different jurisdictions. So it was handled a little bit differently. And this was a surprise. Now, remember when they announced a press conference, the Teton County coroner announced a press conference to announce the details into the autopsy that was performed on Gabby Petito's remains. It was not done the same way in Florida. It would have. That's why we were wondering if there was going to be a Sarasota County or District 12 medical examiner's press conference of some kind. But everything that we had heard as far as the process and the procedure here in our area, in the Tampa Bay area of Florida, was that it was going to be handled by the FBI, that there wasn't going to be a similar press conference as what we saw in Teton County, Wyoming, as what we would see in Sarasota County, Florida, that it was going to be handled by the FBI. Here's what we have now today is that, again, our phone calls over to the medical examiner's office there in Sarasota County, they've just been saying everything's going to be handled by the FBI. And so we're anticipating that FBI information coming out at some point. We've been told, again, from Bertolino that it's likely going to be today, tomorrow. So we'll get more information about that. Let's take some more #HeyJB, #HeyJosh questions. Andrea McDaniel, again, if you want to have your comment featured, use #HeyJB or #HeyJosh with your comment, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook Live, or YouTube Live. And if you don't want your comment and your name to be featured on screen as Andrea's is here, Just don't use the hashtag, and we'll let your comment continue to, scroll on by. Andrea here, do you think his parents will ever speak out now behind Steve, the attorney? And we get this question a lot. Will we ever hear from the Laundries? And I remember in covering this story, Stephen Bertolino has maintained that he is non-committal to his clients ever telling their side of the story. We have, of course, had conversations, Josh, on WFLA Now as to whether or not the Laundries would, at any point in the future, want to come forward and say, this is what happened from our perspective. But would they ever do that? Bertolino's remain non-committal.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at it this way. In the topic of closure, absolutely this is not closure for Gabby Petito's family. There's no closure there. There's so many questions that need to be answered.
And justice, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the closure for the family. Get justice, maybe that can provide them some closure, and that we're far from that, sadly. Is this closure for the Laundrie family? Now that they found out how their son died, they have remains. Is it enough for them to have closure? For a lot of people would say, does it matter at this point? Well, I mean, they're human. They have a son, and he's dead. So you have to offer them up that respect to mourn and to deal with that scenario. But the question I think remains now is, you can't really close this case off. You have to find out what the remaining elements are. Now, if the notebook provided answers related to the case, maybe related to Gabby's case, this is hypothetical, but if it provided any answers or clues into what happened to her and how she died specifically, now that I would imagine would open a lot of doors for comment from the family. I mean, people would be demanding to know more about what they knew. And so I think the pressure would be really put on that family to speak, because they would want to know, all right, how much did you know? Was there anything specific about how Brian died and about how Gabby died? Anything that you would know, and they would demand to try to get some answers from that family. So I think it's early. It's pretty early to tell right now what the next step is, but this is at least one piece of the timeline as we move forward in this whole case.
Brian Enton was on News Nation last night, and they were talking about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie and where things go from here with former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendorfer. And it was interesting because one of the things that Jennifer said was everything's under the microscope with this investigation. So if the FBI found something irregular, such as a discarded item, or she said a deleted text message, deleted correspondence, anything that just that is irregular, then of course the investigation goes in that direction. But as of right now, these are grieving parents. So many people, again, we've talked about this so many times on WFLA Now, so many people have wanted to vilify Chris and Roberta Laundrie, when really, in reality, they are and have been over the last several weeks, they are grieving parents to 23-year-old Brian Laundrie. As of, remember, just a few months ago, as of this summer, Chris and Roberta Laundrie thought that, that their 23-year-old son and their 22-year-old daughter-in-law to be were going to get married and have a happy life together, and their whole lives have been turned upside down. And again, they are not facing any charges. Right. We have to, again, stay rooted in reality. They're not facing any charges right now. They haven't even been the only thing that doesn't really add up as from a law enforcement standpoint, and I could talk about the Petitos and the Schmitz, but from a law enforcement standpoint, is when the Northport Police Department, Josh Taylor, spokesperson for the Northport Police, says that early on in their investigation that there wasn't full cooperation from the Laundrie family. That's how he put it, that they did not cooperate fully. This was around the time when the mix-up with Northport Police admitting that they thought that they saw Brian leave the home, when in reality it was Roberta Laundrie. And then Josh Taylor came out and said, well, that there wasn't full cooperation early on in the investigation from the Laundries themselves, from Chris and Roberta. So let's just keep everything, let's stay, again, to the facts, folks, and it's really important.
Point I want to bring up too on the fact is if they will talk or not. Jaden just sent me a good message, and this makes sense, that Stephen Bertolino has done several interviews, we know, and he did mention that maybe later they will speak. Now is not the time. And I actually remember him saying that several times. Will the parents speak? Maybe later. Now is not the time. So he kept the door open there. And so given the new development, obviously they're grieving, and we respect that, and that will take some time now that they have confirmation of how their son died. But after this is over, the holidays are over, maybe we will hear from the parents on just everything that transpired in the last 3-4 months.
Lisa Tomlinson, hashtag HJB, any DNA found? DNA, as far as it being a resource in this case, you have to imagine that at this stage in the investigation that DNA has been absolutely utilized as far as a means of trying to obtain evidence and something that can be used used procedurally, whether or not this case were to ever get to a court of law. But you would imagine that DNA is, of course, very much a part of the investigation, not just into into both investigations, into both deaths. But we haven't heard anything about DNA other than a couple of weeks ago when Josh Taylor told us that that at that time that DNA hadn't been part of the forensics examination at that stage and where they were at the time with Brian Laundrie's remains. Well,
and a lot of people are asking, they want official DNA results to confirm that these remains are Brian Laundrie. So now we're going to expect to see a report on the death here, hopefully soon, where we can actually get some answers on how they came to this conclusion, what specifically they analyzed, and how, somebody like an anthropologist or a medical examiner can make this determination. So that should hopefully clear up things related to DNA or not. But yeah, for sure they would have a DNA sample profile on record.
Interesting question here. So Tracy Hennessy Coledge, hashtag AJB, how can they determine it was a gunshot with only a partial skull found? And this is where having a forensic anthropologist would be, but perhaps it's only a partial skull because it was a gunshot wound to the head.
And they can look at the cracks, essentially, on the remains that were found to determine what's natural and what's not natural. I mean, they're that specific in how they review these things, essentially under a microscope, to determine, differences in how, that bone would separate.
Let's not forget, too, that the FBI has immeasurable resources to be able to tap into the expertise of some of the best in their fields, right, including anthropology. So
my question would be, would they be able to tell the type of firearm just based off of what they have?
Right.
Ballistics tests. That would be interesting because you have so little to work with, but they are very good and they have great resources, like you said, JB. And I think if they could determine the ballistics, the type of firearm used, that would be very interesting. If they don't have the gun already. We don't know that they don't.
Right on that point. Let's do 3 for 1 here. Lauren Dolce, hashtag AJB, did the FBI say they found a gun with the body? I recall the backpack, notebook, but not a gun. Is the comment from Lauren. Samantha Ward, hashtag AJB, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Where's the gun?
Right.
And then lastly, David Wright, hashtag AJB, did they find the gun? Not only did they find the gun, but speaking of ballistics, any signs whatsoever too of a bullet that was used in the self-inflicted gunshot wound. So
yeah, and what might be also interesting too is they may have found the gun, and obviously they keep everything close to the vest, and I'm surprised they even released what they found. Maybe they held that gun back just in the event that they wanted to look at anything else that gun could have been related to, what the history of that gun was. They wanted to make sure that all of that was buttoned up and they knew every detail before they came to this conclusion and even released this fact. I know it took time to determine the cause and manner of death, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did find it and then just held that back.
Let's also ask this question that's important. Where did he get a gun? It might not be, again.
That's what I mean. They probably track, if they were to have it, they could track that as far back as they'd probably need to be, based on serials or based on just history, maybe talking to the family, just determining maybe if it was a pawn shop. I mean, they would start working on that.
Right.
And we would have no idea what part of that investigation was happening.
And I don't remember at any stage having any conversations that pointed to, right, did Brian, was Brian a firearm owner? Who was it something from his family's home there in Northport?
They may have just had it in the family. You never know.
We don't know. Again, a answer that pops up more questions as we would usually see. Josh Benson, JB Buno here with you live, everybody on WFLA Now. Again, we don't know if 3 o'clock Eastern is going to be the time when we're going to get the FBI update. We have heard, of course, that an FBI update is
coming.
in the works, I think is a fair way to put it, based on some of the things that we've heard and doing the jobs that we do. But whether or not it comes, it could come today, it could come tomorrow. We're anticipating getting some information here shortly, but everything that we're hearing, so we're local here in the Tampa Bay area, everything that we are hearing is that it's going to be released by the FBI, and let's not forget that the lead agency in charge is FBI Denver, so we'll see exactly who releases that information, when they release it, and really what that information is in the long run. Anything you're seeing, Josh, on social before I bring up some more questions and comments?
I want to clarify, we don't know for sure that the FBI report is coming. Based on chats with the attorney, he indicated that, let me just read this again so there's no confusion, so you guys all expect the FBI to come out. Because again, we don't know what the FBI is thinking, nor do we get any lead times on this. I said, will the FBI update us? The medical examiner says it's not coming from them. Thanks for the help. He said, I was told the info to be released at 1 p.m. Not sure if that happened. And I said, from FBI, perhaps 3 p.m. Mountain from FBI? He says, don't know. So then I asked him, who gave you the info? The FBI? So he hasn't responded to that, so we'll see.
And again, talking to
Stephen Bertolino, the family attorney for the Laundries.
Okay. Reading through some of the comments that have just come in. And Jennifer Lynn, again, back to the timeline. Hashtag AJB, have they said how long Brian was deceased for? And yeah, again, as far as piecing together the timeline, this is a
people want answers.
People want answers.
And that report, if there is a report, hopefully there will be, that will help give us some of those answers. We just don't have it yet.
And let's also, and Josh, I was juggling a lot on this stream, so apologies if you brought this up before.
Well, it was funny because you and I were sitting here talking, looking at some of the new features we have here, and I left my phones at the desk. I've been on it all day. The minute I walk away, we get the update. And we're scampering to try to get,
yeah, and then typing too fast, and then again that leads to my my homicide suicide mix up on my tweet and Facebook post, which again, full disclosure, super sorry for apologies there for any mix up. That was just an honest mistake of typing way too quickly. But so Special Agent in Charge McPherson comes out, makes the announcement that that they have found remains at the Carlton Reserve, and that they have a book bag, and they also have the notebook, but not a firearm. Now, what's interesting is that now we know that the cause of death is, the manner of death has been revealed to be a suicide, according to Bertolino, the Laundrie family attorney. Is the notebook the suicide note? This is now
but everybody's asking the question. I mean, you're fair to ask that question because, that affects this case in a major way.
It does, because
it could have the whole case pivoting on it, for all we know. I mean, if there is a suicide note, doesn't mean he's guilty of what happened necessarily, but if he was, maybe that could be written in there. We don't know, but everybody's asking that question. What's in the notebook? And the notebook seemed to be somewhat protected by the bag. So as far as we know, so even if it was underwater, you'd think there would be enough. It would be legible enough to see what was written, if anything. Or maybe it was drawings. We knew he liked to draw, too.
And Coffindoffer last night on News Nation talking about how there's chemical and indentation techniques that would blow your mind as far as what the FBI has to resurrect the words off the page, if there are words off the page. We've talked about it on WFLA now that the notebook could just be doodles, could be drawings.
And that's a good point. I did a story literally 20 years ago, and think of the technology now, but 20 years ago with the DCI back in the Midwest. And they actually showed how you could take a check written out, and some people were forging checks. They lifted the ink, they showed the indentation from the pen, and how they actually lifted the ink off, rewrote it, and that's how they busted this guy, because they saw the indentation from the previous pen under a microscope. Fascinating stuff. So that's 20 years ago. So the technology now has got to be leaps and bounds better.
You would imagine so. And so, and we talked about it on stream recently with Masa Saidi and Walt Buteau, our 8 on Your Side team, whether or not, if it didn't contain any pertinent information to the investigations into Brian Laundrie's death and to Gabby Petito's death, would they just release it back to the family as sort of a memento? Or is it something that they would keep as evidence in their investigation, depending on where the investigation would be?
As long as the case is open,
Exactly. So the notebook now becomes, it resurfaces. And let's get to some more comments here in just a moment. You can use hashtag HJB, hashtag HJosh. But as far as, again, where's the gun? If Brian Laundrie...
And wasn't there a phone we're looking for too? Gabby's phone?
Right.
I think a lot of people have been asking about that. So there's pieces to this puzzle that haven't been discovered yet, or how they fit in.
Or at least publicly revealed from the FBI. The FBI could have 98% of this case wrapped up, and they're just procedurally now going through the paces before they announce anything. That's entirely possible, maybe not be all that likely in the estimations of FBI agents or excuse me, former FBI agents or FBI experts, but where things stand right now, we don't know as far as an investigation goes if they have a third of this wrapped up, half of it wrapped up, or a majority of it wrapped up. We don't know, because we don't know the amount of evidence that they have and the amount of answers that they have. But they have, of course, conducted all the here's another thing. Here's another thing I want to bring up. So the FBI comes out and they announce that they find the book bag, they find the backpack, and they find the book bag, and they find the notebook, excuse me, at the Carlton Reserve. And then they continue to search that area. And we had Eagle 8 HD fly over that area where they were searching. They put up the TFR. Remember, Eagle 8 HD had to go above the TFR and had to really zoom in there. You're looking at the Carlton Reserve. One of the things that they announced, the book bag has been found. They announced that the notebook was found. That's the last time we've heard from the FBI. Is it possible that later on that day, or even the following morning, that they continued their examination of the area and then they said, "Oh, there it is, found the gun"? It would be shocking to me, mind-blowingly shocking, if somehow, Josh, the gun was still at the Carlton Reserve.
Well, yeah, and I think a good point was just made that, keep in mind, human remains can move pretty easily. They could go with the water. They could go from animals. So this could have happened, somewhere where we don't necessarily believe it happened after finding the remains. It could have been 50 feet away. It could have been 100 feet away. I guess we don't know. So that's the thing. If they were searching in the area and they really searched where the remains were found, doesn't necessarily mean that gun is 50 feet in another direction. So I look at a gun as a very sensitive piece of evidence, so I could see them finding it and not releasing that information to the public, just given the severity of what they found. And the questions that still remain: was that gun used any other way? Was it used for anything? Where does that come? They would have to go through and really analyze the background of that gun to make sure they know what they're dealing with. Because otherwise, they would be, if they made that public, they would open up the fact that, hey, here's a gun that was found. And then suddenly, if it was tied to any other case, you're putting information that's very sensitive out there. So the FBI doesn't give out everything. They hold a ton back.
They do. And they're known for it. Let's see. Let's get to some of the other comments that have come in the last several moments with hashtag HJB and hashtag HJosh.
And I'm still trying to find out who gave him that, the attorney, that information. I asked him if it was the FBI. I would assume it's the FBI, but he hasn't responded to that yet. So I'm waiting on that.
Paula, hashtag HeyJB, is there going to be a press conference? What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think I'm leaning towards no?
Really?
I'm leaning towards just a release. What do you think? You
just given your
inclination.
Yeah, just the media exposure to this case, I think it would be proper to do a news conference just to bring the media in and have some questions answered, just to kind of put to rest a lot of these questions that are floating around. I think it would benefit them more, the agency, just because then if they can open. This is
interesting because based on our experiences as reporters, your initial gut told you that you think that there's going to be a press conference today, and I thought that the chances was 1 in 100.
Yeah. I mean, look, they could just send the report and then just get inundated from all the reporters about questions that we don't have the answers to. Or they could give a news conference, say, here's the report, we're going to release it. This is what we found. This is what we have on the case. We'll open the floor for questions, and they can decide to answer them or not. But at least it makes the official record and gives people answers that they're willing to answer, the questions that they want to answer. And then it just calms the case down a little bit. So I mean, for them,
That's true.
I think it is a beneficial move. But again, what do I know?
It feeds the public demand for answers. I just the FBI in their press conferences. I can't imagine a forum where they announce this information and then they open it up to questions, because that's usually the FBI doesn't.
No, it's a good point. And
Just to like say, all right, what questions do you have?
No,
well,
and on your point.
Well, excuse me, let me go down the list of 1 million questions that we still have, because how long do you have, FBI? Because I have in my notes at least 30, 40 questions that I would like answered.
You bring up a good point, because, you know, Gabby Petito didn't kill herself. We know it was strangulation, and somebody's out there who killed her. And so as long as that's an open investigation and Brian Laundrie was the last person essentially to be involved, as far as I know, that's a sensitive part of the investigation. So you're right. I don't think they'll answer questions, but they have a forum where they can put out the information that they know. Otherwise, they're just going to be continually inundated. But I don't think they care, because they're the FBI and they're not going to respond anyway.
I'm very, listen, I could be 100% wrong. There could be a press conference in an hour. It could be announced at any moment.
Given the media exposure and how big this case has been around the country, it seems appropriate to give a short news conference, just say, this is the latest, this is the cause of death, the manner of death, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think it's more common that, or more likely rather, that it would be in the form of just a pretty standard release. But we'll see everybody. Let's see what happens at 3 o'clock Eastern, and see if anything does happen around that time. Cecilia, #AJB, did they confirm a gun was involved? Wondering if the partial skull could be from the environmental damage. And again, I'll read this from Stephen Bertolino. Chris and Roberta Laundrie have been informed that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, and the manner of death was suicide. Chris and Roberta are still mourning the loss of their son and are hopeful these findings bring closure to both families. Gunshot wound to the head, that pretty much confirms that a gun was used. Carly Pearson, #HeyJB, #HeyJosh. Now that they have a cause of death for Brian, do you think that they will ever come out and make a statement on whether it was Brian that killed Gabby? So this is now the logical next step.
Yeah, and this piggybacks a comment I just got too. If there was enough evidence, could Brian be charged posthumously? And if they were to find that his parents knew something, what would happen to them?
I don't know if they would. You can't. And we've talked about this on stream. Filing charges against a person who is deceased. I think that that would be the forum for a press conference.
Oh, for sure.
That would be the forum for a press conference.
They have enough evidence they could say that X person was involved.
Because otherwise, it's not going to ever get brought out in a court of law. There's never going to be a murder trial. Right. So
you can't defend a dead person.
The forum would be in that to share some information to the public. That forum would be a press conference where they would say, we're not here to file charges. We can't file charges against the suspect in this case because the suspect is deceased.
Right.
That deceased person is Brian Laundrie. If based on the comment here from Carly, if that's entirely what happened as far as the manual strangulation.
I mean, true.
This is now going to continue into December, or maybe January, or maybe beyond. As to when
this may stay quiet for a very long time.
It could, it could. But the public,
it's the unfortunate part about it.
And we know from covering this story as extensively as we have, Josh, we know that the public. So there's different.
Hey guys, I appreciate you guys for watching. Please leave a like on the video and sub to help me grow my page for more content.
To stand up in front of a podium, to stand there in front of the bright lights, so to speak, and announce the results of their investigation. And then there are other people out there who feel they are so 100% in their minds or in their hearts that they know what happened between Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, that they don't need the FBI to come forward and announce it. They feel like that this is so black and white, clear cut, and they've moved on to and they're not obsessing on this story from a day-to-day basis. Does that make sense? That there are the two sort of people out there that want there to be that announcement from the FBI, and then the others who are just saying, you know, I would much rather see FBI resources be committed to other investigations that are more pertinent, because we know because in the minds of the public, or at least so many out there, they feel that they know exactly what happened between Brian and Gabby.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it would be a bummer to see this case just go cold and then think back, you know, 5-10 years later, I wonder what ever happened with that case. You know, there's so many of those missing person cases that happen when, you know, even one that I've covered for 20 years, I wonder if they ever found her. I wonder if they ever, you know, and that's frustrating to hear, because that's what realistically happens on cases that just fall off the radar. You know, if they don't get any media attention, and that's the sad reality, especially with missing person cases. If there's no support there to put the message out, a lot of those cases go that direction. Now, we do have two bodies at this point. So there's an active crime scene still being looked at with Gabby's situation. So I don't think that investigation ends. I think that obviously there's too many questions left. So yeah, the hope is you'll get some answers, and we'll hear that news conference down the line saying this is what happened. We can put some closure on it and have a little bit of justice. I know the family wants that, and everybody else wants that. But yeah, it's one of those things where it comes down to evidence. It comes down to, I think there would be some resources on this for as long as possible, because they want to solve that crime. As long as there's an open case, as far as I understand, they'll have an FBI agent on the case, if not several, for a while at least, to see if they can get any answers, because this isn't over yet.
Use hashtag HeyJB. Let's do this. Use hashtag HeyJB. Use hashtag HeyJosh. Are you still seeking that FBI
confirmation,
that FBI results-based announcement of?
I'm about to like hashtag them and see if they answer me.
More in the mindset of,
I'm basically using their stream
page of where we are, at least public information. Are you one of the people out there that feels that we've gone over this enough? You feel like you know what has happened, and it's time to look ahead and not backwards. There are people out there that do feel that way. So I want to give everybody the opportunity. Use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJosh, and we'll throw up a flurry of comments up here answering that question. We're going to be here live another 10 minutes on stream.
Yep.
But what we might do is what we'll do is, if there is an announcement at 3 o'clock, we'll come back on stream and we'll discuss it more with you based on whether or not there is a 3 o'clock Eastern update of some kind. So let's get to this comment from Sherry Hutchison. Hashtag HeyJB, do you think the parents will be charged with anything? And Josh, we've talked about this right now. They aren't charged with anything, and there's no evidence or no knowledge at this time that they
are guilty of anything.
Right. So do we think the parents will be charged with anything? We can't say, because we just don't know what the FBI knows. And now maybe Misty here, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJosh. Now we wait for official DNA analysis.
Well,
is that the next step?
That's what the report, I think, will help indicate if they're for certain that's him, and they have the report from the anthropologist and the medical examiner. That may include a DNA profile and analysis. So we don't know yet.
All right, now we have a flurry.
That would be good, because then that would put to rest any idea that people think maybe it's not him, even though they just announced how he died and the manner of death and cause of death.
Okay, we got a flurry of comments that are now just coming in. Let's see. Erica Snyder Dewberry. Hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJosh. I want details. I want FBI talk. I want reasoning. I want the notebook details.
That's the majority of Twitter followers.
Yeah,
in this case.
I think that, but we do get the comments from time to time saying, like we know this is so. And again, the estimation.
If it was my kid, I'd want this thing to never stop.
That's interesting.
Petito's family, I would want this thing to go on, regardless of resources and costs. I would fight, as they are fighting. They're putting the word out for other people's missing person cases. They're with the foundation, everything. They're doing great work. But I would want, as a dad, I would want every resource possible used until we figured out what happened. And I would probably spend my life savings trying to figure it out.
Dad of the year, Josh Benson, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's get to this comment from Elaine or Ellen. I can't see. Hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJosh. I still want answers from the FBI, what they have. Kevin Dale, hashtag HeyJB. I just really want to know what happened to Gabby. Lexi, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJosh. I want to hear from the FBI.
Yep.
If you're watching right now and you've been watching 45 minutes now into our stream, likely you're on this stream because you want answers and you want the FBI to come forward with what they have. And again, there are so many people out there who want justice for Gabby. Let's talk about justice for Gabby for a second. I had Nicole Schmidt, Gabby's mom, Joe Petito, Gabby's father, and Tara Petito, Gabby's stepmom, on the stream. Was that last week? My goodness, November has really flown by. Yeah, it was last week. And I asked them what justice for Gabby is, what it means to them, and at least publicly what they said to me, and they said during the interview, the live interview on WFLA Now, is they said that justice for them is ensuring this doesn't happen in the future. They are looking forward, not backward, at least publicly. That's what they said to me, that justice for them is using the Gabby Petito Foundation to ensure that this similar situation never has to happen to anybody else in the future. If it can be prevented, let's do something about it and prevent it.
Right.
But justice for Gabby, for so many people out there, are those who want it definitively put in the record book, so to speak. This is what happened to Gabby. This is who did it, and this is the result of the investigation.
And look, I'd just like to make a note, too, that Gabby has propelled a whole new interest in missing person cases. I'm on Twitter every day. At 1:30, I'm on Twitter for a Josh Live Space is what I call it. So I jump on there at 1:30 and we talk about missing person cases, news of the day, whatnot. But there is an online community out there that is so focused on helping find information in missing person cases that daily, this is what these people do. They're out there trying to find information. They're trying to get a hold of law enforcement. These smaller town police departments, they're pressuring to like release Amber Alerts. And I'm seeing this stuff every day. And this is all pretty much a direct result of Gabby's case, because people took a lot of anger and a lot of energy, and they're directing it by what I think they feel is a positive outlook and a positive energy to push in to try to solve some of these missing person cases. We had a case the other day with Noah Claire and Amber Claire. We followed very closely. 2 kids. The dad took both the niece and the son and took off to California. Person A disappears and gets no attention, and they've been missing a month. All of a sudden, Amber Alert is announced. That person's on the TV within minutes.
Yeah,
within
minutes, seconds.
And all of a sudden, eyeballs everywhere are seeing it online. They're seeing it maybe on here. They're seeing it on TV. And all of a sudden, people can be proactive and take action. The challenge is, though, and I'm still noticing that's pretty archaic, is the communication between law enforcement agencies. You could have a law enforcement agency on the East Coast and something like somebody in San Diego, California, almost with this Claire case, something similar. It took a long time to get an Amber Alert announced, and I don't think they were necessarily sharing information as well as they could have been. And this really gets detrimental when it's a smaller town police department, or you're kind of out in the country where they don't have a ton of resources. How can you pull all those people together on a uniform system so they can get ahead of the game a lot faster and help find people, because time is of the essence when somebody disappears.
This whole case is wild.
Where this goes, I know that Joe Petito has talked to Governor Ron DeSantis. Joe Petito, a Vero Beach resident, spoke to Governor Ron DeSantis. So very interested to where it goes from here. Let's get one more #HeyJB comment before we have to wrap up this stream on WFLA Now. And Samantha Ward asking #HeyJB, has there been FBI agents out there with metal detectors? And this question being asked because now the question is, where is the gun? Where is the firearm that was used by Brian Laundrie? Gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide. Where is the gun, and what process was done here at the Carlton Reserve to potentially find a firearm there at the site? And so I remember from Eagle 8 HD, Josh, there was a lot of tree cover on the area where the remains were found, and it was really hard to see. And when they put up the TFR and Eagle had to go even higher in the air, it was even more difficult to see.
I appreciate you guys watching. Please like the video and sub to my page to help me grow my page.
I'll break this in from Allison Henning. It says Northport PD will release a statement after the FBI release comes down.
Interesting.
So she might be getting, it sounds like Northport's going to plan their statement, but letting FBI announce it first.
Oh, the FBI is about to come out with a statement.
Release is imminent. So thank you, Allison, for that. That just came out from Allison. So we're on the lookout for both things, and any indication from the attorney today that could possibly happen today.
I'm going to explain where this goes, but I know Josh has to get going. Josh, any final thoughts?
No, I think this was, I think a lot of people saw something coming. They were waiting for something specific. The gun was interesting because there is no gun that we know of from this suicide. We don't know if it's still in the reserve. We don't know if the FBI has the gun. But that is going to be the talk now, and we're awaiting hopefully an FBI announcement or a release of some sort. And we just heard that Northport PD will release its own statement after the FBI comes out with their statement. As far as what I'm working on, invite you to come check me out on Twitter every day at WFLA Josh. I do a Twitter space.
Really interesting. I guess that's the end of that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys for watching. Don't forget to like the video and sub to my page to help me grow.